Good evening, Chicago, and welcome back to Little C TV. I'm your host, Lisa Hoffman, and on behalf of the 1 out of every 110 children born with autism in our country today, thank you for joining in on our dialogue and tuning into the only live autism awareness show in Chicago. As you know, it is our goal each week to take an insightful look into the world of autism and learn what we can do as parents, as family members, and friends to help improve the lives of people with these disabilities. Tonight we have the pleasure of hosting Dr. Tamar Heller. Dr. Heller is a professor and head of the Department of Disability and Human Development at the University of Illinois at Chicago and director of its University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities for the state of Illinois. She also directs the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on Aging with Developmental Disabilities. Dr. Heller has written over 150 publications and presented numerous papers on family support interventions and policies, self-determination, health promotion, and aging of people with developmental disabilities. She has co-edited 2 books, has 2 others in press, and served as the editor for various industry publications. She is president of the board of the Association of University Centers on Disabilities, and in 2005, Dr. Heller was a delegate to the White House Conference on Aging. As a co-founder of the National Sibling Leadership Network, she's a member of its steering committee. Dr. Heller has also received numerous awards for her work and leadership in the field. So, Dr. Heller, it's an honor to have you here on our show tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. As you can tell, Dr. Heller, from the biography, is very knowledgeable in the field of developmental disabilities and an expert in aging and autism. So, Dr. Heller, can you share with our guests how you got involved in the field and share your personal story with us?
Okay. I think it really started with my sister, who was born when I was 11 years old, and she has cerebral palsy, and now she's in her late 40s, and I had brought her from Ohio to Chicago when she became an adult, and so I play a big role in her life. She now lives in a group home, and I've watched her age, and I've watched the issues that she has faced, her age-related health changes and problems, and the work that I've had to do in advocacy so that she could be in a group home setting rather than a nursing home where she was for a while. So I've been quite involved, largely because of her, I think.
Well, that's great. It's great for your work in the field. Thank you. So can you share with our audience some of the effects of aging on individuals with autism and how they differ, how they might differ from an individual without autism?
What I'd like to say first is that we don't know very much about aging with autism, and many people with autism have not been diagnosed that are older.
Right.
And there's many reasons
because diagnosis
for that.
Just started, isn't that correct?
Yeah, in 1943 with that Canner, and so if you think about that, many people have been missed that are older. There's also many other reasons why they're missed, because our diagnostic categories have changed. Right. So that many people who in the past might have been called eccentric, might have been labeled mentally retarded, or different words that were used back then, or they may have been labeled schizophrenic or seen as having some other kind of a mental illness. And there have been some studies where they've looked in nursing homes and in institutions and thought, some of these people are misdiagnosed.
Right.
And if they would have been diagnosed years earlier,
they could have had more help and received more treatment.
They could have had more treatment, and they could have been very different. Because of the misdiagnosis, they may have gotten the wrong medicines, the wrong treatments. So, that's part of the reason that we don't have so many. But there are some studies that are looking at that. There's a big network from Hopkins that's looking at registries, and they have about a third of the people they have on there with autism are over the age of 45 years old. But I would expect in the coming years we're going to see a lot more. We'll probably see, I'd say by 2050 for sure, a doubling of older people with autism, if not a lot more, given the big increase that's been diagnosing people with autism. So
Right.
it should be quite a challenge in terms of the field.
Right. Now, one of the things that we tell our parents that are watching is to visit our website or look for a developmental milestones chart so that they can monitor their children's development and their children's growth and become aware, so that if their child has autism or they can be diagnosed early, so treatment can begin early. What is the age for a diet? Do you know the certain age?
Well, they're starting very early now. Now it's as early as 2 years old.
To diagnose?
Yeah.
Before they can diagnose
Yeah,
a child.
and it used to be much later.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I remember when I was first a school psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked for the Chicago ARC, and I remember from the hundreds of kids, there were only a few kids that I would say had classic autism, from the ones I had diagnosed back then.
All of our seniors with developmental disabilities that have missed diagnosis because they're older, can we diagnose them now? Now that they're older, are there diagnostics?
It is possible, but
really hard.
it's probably hard at that point. I mean, we've been stressing the importance of early intervention with people, and so there's a big movement towards that.
Right. Well, it looks like we have our first caller for Dr. Heller. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello, this is Sean Jeffers. I just listened to my good friend, Dr. Tamar Heller, and I first want to just thank her for joining in, but I do have a question on Dr. Heller. When we look at autism as, of course, being a spectrum disorder, and particularly as it relates to adults, there is not a notion of one size fits all. What do you see as the strategies that an organization like Little City should employ to meet the ever-changing needs of adults with disabilities? What are the things you think we should concentrate on?
Well, I think, as with people with developmental disabilities, the supports for adults are just so critical, and we know that the mandate in the school system is, you have to get some kind of education, and a public education, and for adults we don't have that kind of mandate. And the supports are so important because you'll see so many people that are sitting at home doing nothing and not involved in anything. We know that for people with autism, many of them are not employed, underemployed. Many live at home with families. There's people that they're really quite high functioning that really have trouble getting jobs and being employed, sometimes because of the social behavior that gets in the way. So any kind of supports like that are really critical. As I'm going to talk some more about this, I'll talk about a few areas that I think are really critical, and I'd like to give a little background first. If you want, maybe I'll start with the health issues.
Yes.
As people get older, and what might be unique about people with autism. Well, one has to do with, let me say first that there's so little research about this, but the reasons to think about what concerns there might be. Let me start, for example, with diet. People's eating behaviors could cause a problem if they're, very picky eaters, or they're very obsessive about what they eat, or they only eat one kind of food. That can have long-term implications. We know there's a high rate of obesity, actually, in people with autism, and higher even than general developmental disabilities, which is also high, and higher than the general population. So fits in nicely with Michelle Obama's obesity campaign, but it's a really important issue. And one of my colleagues, one of our faculty in our department, Jim Rimmer, has been doing research on that nationally and talking about the importance of looking at obesity, even starting in childhood for people with autism and developmental disabilities. A second area related to diet is that some people go on these special kinds of diets, mega vitamins or gluten-free, and each of those has implications around calcium and sometimes vitamin overdose. So, there's many issues. We don't know the long-term effects of some of these. Another area is medication. So people are on all kinds of medications, and again, we don't have much research on, what happens when you're on medications for so many years.
Right.
Many people with autism, or at least some people, have epilepsy, for example, and medications for that have many implications around osteoporosis and many other issues related to having those kinds of medications. Some people with autism have sleep disorders, and sleep deprivation has impacts over the long run. So I think there's many issues around that. We don't even have any good studies on lifespan for people with autism. And there are, I saw one study that looked actually at death rates and saw quite a few people that had died of drowning.
Really?
As one of the issues from, wandering
Right.
into that. And another was around seizures for people who didn't have seizure control. So those are just two examples of areas related to health. Now, if we're talking about health, really important, the health promotion. And we know there is research that shows that for people with autism, that physical activity has really good effects. It has good effects on behaviors. It has good effect on health. It also has good effects on mental health of people. And also in this population. So health promotion, I think, is really important, especially as people get older. You start earlier, but the effects are cumulative, and it's never too late to start, we say.
Right. Last week we had a guest, David Geslack, who talked about exercise planning and individual exercise planning and fitness for children with autism. So
great.
And he's one of the first in the field, so work ties in nicely to what you're saying right now.
We actually have a curriculum that we've developed in 2 books that have just come out from Brooks called Health Matters. And one is a curriculum on exercise and nutrition, health education for adults with developmental disabilities. And another is Health Matters, that's about how you develop health promotion programs for adults with developmental disabilities. And it's geared to, and the first book is really geared to people with cognitive limitations and other developmental disabilities in terms of really trying to make things simple so that people understand.
We'll put that book and some of that information on our website for service providers like Little City and other service providers in the Chicago area, because I know we just opened up a Center for Health and Wellness recently.
Great.
And one of the elements of the Center for Health and Wellness is, in addition to primary oral and primary health care and oral health care, we have nutrition classes and recreational activities and physical fitness classes for individuals with disabilities. But it looks like we have another caller on the air for Dr. Heller. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Scarlett. I have an 18-year-old son graduating from Kenwood Academy, and I'm going to know what is the process for transitioning from high school to college.
You have a child who's graduating and a process from high school to college, is your question? Is there a process?
Right. Do you understand your question?
Yes, our expert is here to talk about aging and autism, but do you have any thoughts on a parent who has a graduating child?
I think, it's an important area, the transition to post-secondary education. And, there are some initiatives happening all over the country in terms of trying to help people with developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and autism in regard to post-secondary education. There are some programs that are more of a segregated kind, but there's also programs being developed that are much more integrated. And some of the community colleges and also the other universities do have disability resource centers that can help people with disabilities in terms of getting the kind of accommodations that they need. And people with autism can also apply for that kind of accommodation at the universities and colleges.
That's great. Maybe if there's a link, does UIC have one, or other universities that you know of?
We have a
one?
Disability Resource Center.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
After the show, Dr. Heller will give me that link, and we'll put it on littlecity.org/autism. So for your child who's graduating, you can take a look at that link and see if that could be a fit. But congratulations. So going back to the importance of healthcare for individuals with autism that are aging, and the promotion of that, what can our viewers and family members and parents do to promote healthcare and to promote that? Is there anything that we can do?
Well, one is to find a good healthcare provider. That's really important.
But I guess
I know Little City's opening up some healthcare
Right.
center, which I think is really great to be able to do that. I think physical activity as part of daily life, being active, is really important. And, you know, just walking, for example, walking club would be great. Being able to do a walking program. I've been involved with Special Olympics health promotion programs, and there was just one in Indiana that was great, where they had 400 people involved in walking clubs.
Wow.
These were people who had various developmental disabilities.
Yeah, we have a very involved Special Olympics program at Little City too, so that is great. Looks like we have another caller for Dr. Heller. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, I have a friend who has a brother with a disability. I'm wondering, Dr. Heller, are there any types of support network groups, either locally or nationally, that I can recommend?
She has a friend who has a brother, so like support,
a brother.
Support for siblings who have.
Yes, I can talk a lot about that. In fact, we have a few things. In Illinois, you have Illinois SIBS, SIBS, and I can give the connection for that. And they actually even got incorporated, so they're an official organization just recently, and it's a wonderful network. I'm a part of that and helped develop that also. And we also have the National Sibling Leadership Network, and that's we have many chapters really getting started all over the country. We're going to have a big conference in August in Connecticut, a big national one. It'll be an international sibling conference. And there's also something called SibNet, which is an online, kind of like a chat room online. It's a wonderful resource, and there's lots of siblings who get on there and get lots of support from each other.
Wonderful.
There's a good book that just came out with essays, a book by Don Meyer, who had siblings write essays about their brothers and sisters. So, and there'll be a website coming out real soon for the Sibling Leadership Network. I think it's really important. I go to some of these events, and you'll find siblings really bonding with each other. And the mission of this Sibling Leadership Network is to advocate for their sibling and with their sibling with disability, and to get support for the siblings that are doing the caregiving, as well as the siblings with disabilities who sometimes also do caregiving. It can be in both directions. So they bring meaning to people's lives, and it's a back and forth kind of.
That's great. So I think you're a co-founder of this association too, correct?
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you. So that probably leads me to one of my next questions. Can you talk about what some of the impacts are on siblings who have who have loved ones in their family, brothers and sisters with autism?
People have looked. There was a big national survey that was done, and also some research that's come out of the Weissman Center under Marcia Seltzer and her group that's looked at comparing what the impact on siblings are that have a brother or sister with autism, and they compare that with Down syndrome or with other disabilities. And often it's more stressful when there is autism. And just like in general with developmental disabilities, the person who's usually the closest and the one most involved is, of course, a sister. And it seems like the relationship is a little smoother if it's a sister with a sister than a sister with a brother with disabilities. But I want to say that people also have positive impacts. And it's not just a negative. Many people like to talk about the negative impacts and the stress of it. And for many people, it's a very meaningful relationship that really works in both directions.
Right. We like sharing the positive aspects here on Little CTV because there's so much negativity surrounding it, so much stigma, but really, you know, it can be a very meaningful and positive thing. So I totally, completely agree. We also like success stories on Little CTV. Does one come to mind that you could share?
Well, I'm just kind of struck. I'm going to frame this first as not a success and then turn it in. If any of you have seen Refrigerator Moms, it's a great film, and it was actually locally produced, and it traces the family impact, and it starts with really all the horrible aspects of how parents were blamed, and how you know, especially the mothers were blamed as being cold, basically refrigerator moms, and somehow causing the autism. Well, in that film, they show people many years later and how, you know, people with autism are faring. And you see many situations where the whole relationship is so meaningful to the parents, the whole relationship, and you know how much they love their son or daughter with autism, and that it's very much of a two-way street. And I think it's a film that everyone should see in this field.
Refrigerator Moms.
It's a fabulous movie. I always show it to my class. I teach a class on disability in the family, and always show that. There's many people. We have employees in our university that have Asperger's that are working in our university. You know, we've had graduate students with Asperger's. We have a PhD in disability studies that have had that. I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of hope for people. In regard to what families report in the few studies that I have seen, is that often, although autism is a lifelong condition and, you know, doesn't necessarily go away, people report that really a lot of the behaviors really improve over time, and, you know, sometimes the you know, people learn to adjust in their life. And so there are success stories. There's people who have learned what they start to understand sometimes in their teenage years, you know, what their disability is about, what does it mean, and how do they compensate for that, and how do they use it in a way that's useful. So for example, if someone's obsessive, how do they use that obsessiveness maybe for career success, for certain kinds of jobs. So you really have to take and turn it into a positive for a person, and really help them through that.
Absolutely. And working at Little City, I have to say, you know, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have a tremendous amount to contribute, whether it's through the arts or through music or through just any life lessons. So sometimes it's not even just us at Little City helping them, it's them helping us. So they're inspiring, and they're incredible individuals, and they have a lot to contribute and a lot of different abilities that we don't have. So
there's a really interesting project in Connecticut that I saw. It's a project where they're helping people with developmental disabilities in taking care of their elderly parents. I think it's a really cool project, because we always talk about, you know, parents taking care of their son or daughter with disability, and this is sort of an opposite one.
That's great.
It's another way to look at that.
That's great. Well, I can't believe our segment is over already, so quick. As always, ladies and gentlemen, if you could not get your question in tonight for Dr. Heller, visit our website at www.littlecity.org/autism, and there you can submit your questions, view recent segments, and take a look at how you can learn about other ways to champion for children and adults with autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities. You can also email us at info@littlecity.org or call us directly at 847-221-78 888-888-8825. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. We hope that you'll take what you learned here tonight and share with others so that we can improve the lives of our most vulnerable citizens in our communities. And thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you here next week, again at 7:30 on CAN TV 21. Thank you for joining us. Good night, Chicago.